I like podiums, so I'm going to use it, and then we'll do the Q&A. But the actual backstory is they sent me an envelope 3.5 years ago, and it had a red seal with wax, and it had an Illuminati. So, like, who doesn't fall for that? I immediately said I would like to be in whatever competition you're holding. I hope to win. I'm unaware of whatever the competition is. And then we got an itty-bitty trophy, but it was well worth it. So what I want to do is, I don't want to mislead you about the objective of my presentation. I almost never get to talk to people who primarily aren't in the audience to try and understand if they should or should not invest. So the reason I like coming here is I actually get to have 35 to 50 really great conversations about what we're thinking about, where we're going, who's working on what. And then I go away and some things activate. So the first year I didn't even have a presentation. I made it and finished it 1 hour prior to presenting. And the final slide had a help wanted thing, CMO. That was super effective, actually. Today, what I want to do is try and compress about 5,000 years of history into about 4.5 minutes. And then I want to tell you what I think is going to happen for the next 50 to 75 years. And then I'd like to assign to you an obligation to do some things potentially with Canopy Tweet. And so at the end of it, you should have some device ready to prepare to take down the email address, which is where you will put your good ideas to work. And we're going to pick not more than 10 parties, I hope, in this room to do those. So why don't we begin with the history? Because prohibition has been terrible for a lot of people, but if you started the business right as it's ending, it has created a pretty wealthy reservoir of opportunity, because a number of people have told me in the prior years that, you know, I don't know if cannabis does anything because there's no clinical trials. Well, like, I don't know if they expected organized crime to run the clinical trials, or like what exactly was the big plan, but the reality is here we are today. And so let's see how we got here. Maybe somebody could play the video.
Over 12,000 years ago, a revolution began to spread throughout the world. Indigenous to Central Asia, cannabis is believed to have existed in the region since the pre-Neolithic period. The Chinese people first cultivated cannabis as early as 4000 BCE. The mythical Chinese Emperor Shen Nung was portrayed as an early proponent of cannabis cultivation for paper and cloth. As the stories go, he was one of the first to champion cannabis for medicinal and recreational purposes. His reported texts, still used today, state that cannabis is good for the 5 organs, as well as bringing the body into yin-yang balance. He added that cannabis was good for your skin, stomach, hair, and energy, and that it could help you let go. And if consumed long enough, could teach people how to talk to the gods. And much like how cannabis is wind-pollinated, its usage wafted westward across the different regions and cultures of the ancient world. In India, cannabis was mentioned in the Vedas, the oldest scriptures of Hinduism. There, cannabis would later be referred to as the food of the gods. It is said that Buddha ate a single seed daily for 6 years while meditating. As European commerce and conquest intersected with the Middle East, India, and Africa, cannabis traveled to new continents, specifically to the Western Hemisphere, courtesy of the Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, British, and French, who made hemp a necessity for their empires back home in Europe. From antiquity into modernity, the possibilities of cannabis grew with the rise of industrialization, science, and medicine. No more so than in Europe and North America. Louis Hébert, apothecary to Samuel de Champlain, planted the first known cannabis plant in Canada in 1606. While the Greeks had long thrown cannabis onto hot coals and spas to relax, Dr. William Brooke O'Shaughnessy was the first European to throw cannabis into rigorous medical testing during the 19th century. He found it had great value as a sedative and an anticonvulsant, relieving the pain of rheumatism, stopping convulsions, and quelling muscle spasms. Validating Indian folk uses of cannabis through a medical lens, O'Shaughnessy popularized cannabis's therapeutic uses in medical papers. O'Shaughnessy's papers created a buzz, starting a trend of turning pot into patent medicines, the precursor to over-the-counter medicine. By the early 20th century, 2,000 different cannabis medicines were being produced by close to 300 manufacturers in the West. Unregulated patent medicines, some of which were dangerous, were advertised with unsubstantiated and often fraudulent claims about their efficacy. This caught the ire of American authorities, who implemented the Pure Food and Drug Act at the start of the 20th century, an action believed to set cannabis on the course to criminalization. In Canada, racism, propaganda, and scare tactic journalism combined to influence the criminalization of cannabis, which was added to the schedule of restricted drugs in 1923 under the Narcotics Drug Act Amendment Bill. Though prohibited, its popularity increased over the 20th century. As citizens advocated for cannabis, Health Canada began to regulate access to cannabis for medical purposes. In 2014, they created an official program that enabled legal cannabis production by authorized licensed producers like Tweed. Regulated, responsible, and reliable licensed producers like Tweed were permitted to safely cultivate medical cannabis for Canadian patients. However, cannabis for recreational use was still illegal. But in 2015, Canadians elected Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, in part because of his promise to legalize the recreational use of cannabis nationally, a promise that passed with C-45, the Cannabis Act. Legalization didn't just end prohibition, it ushered in a new and exciting era for Canada and Canadians alike. A legal market that's regulated, responsible, and full of opportunity. In 2018, we were the first to legally sell recreational cannabis in Canada, while increasing our international footprint to become a leader in production and paving the way for innovative brand partnerships. And in this new world, we want the business world to see the possibilities of a plant that history, as well as our enterprise, has shown to be remarkable. There's a world of opportunity out there. Will you be a part of it?
Okay. So you're going to get a chance to be a part of it. I think they're going to put up what's next. This is me. I actually have 2 ways to improve your event. I have 35 to 50 great conversations. I remember every conversation. I don't remember everyone's name. And so what I'd like to have is maybe headbands that we work in the name on the headband. The other way is if you look at your programming schedule, I don't know who put it together, but they actually had Cheetos before me, at the same time as me, but not after me. You got to think this through more, right? So those are my 2 fixes when I thought about how to improve your event. So what's next, right? We got to the point where we have regulated cannabis in about 30 countries. Almost all of them are exclusively medical. But if you think about the total population under governance of medical cannabis, it makes Canada look super small. We got 36, 37 million people. Think about Germany, Brazil. You start moving all through Europe where you have Poland, you have Denmark. You come down into Italy where they're transitioning into it. You start having Colombia, Chile. So the what's next is going to be a lot more about science that leads to differentiated products that we can wrap brands around. You're going to hear time and again, what we have to do is have a branded segment. Marijuana's got to become branded. I'm going to show you some branded cannabis in here that's dried cannabis. It's in a box. The box is the brand. The product is not differentiated. So you're going to see science drive outcomes, and outcomes are going to turn into things which are scientifically proven and are going to be desirable. And it's going to go from having a clinical trial to help someone with anxiety to a clinical trial that says if you make it into a beverage, Thursday night can be way more fun, no calories. Did I mention no calories? And it will give you an effect that you want. So I think I'll get you through the what's next. And where are we going as Canopy Tweed? Well, customers were pretty excited just not to get criminal results for buying cannabis, and they're already becoming very demanding for the next thing. In Canada, yesterday was the last day you could give commentary on how would you amend what the next generation products are. So let's think about the timeline. If I came to this event last year, as I did, the question that I got all day long was, will the government actually follow through? Will they actually make cannabis available? And everybody thought, probably not, maybe July 1, happens October 17th. By October 17th next year, they're expecting way more stores to have way more differentiated products, which means way more brands are going to be created in Canada and they're going to be carried around the world. And it's because the opportunity for science in Canada exceeds every other place on the planet, simply because of the customer base and the legality. So how does it look for us? Well, the guy in the puffy coat, he has a not really bright future because there's going to be questions about what's in the bag that you want answers to. And when I say that, you're going to want to know, has that stuff been sprayed with microbutanol? Did people wash their hands effectively after the washroom before they touched my weed? I don't think I have to go much further why you're going to stand in line and buy at some of the stores versus deal with that. So how does it look? Well, As a company, we kind of find that we have to keep being who we are, but we got to be a lot more, because the whole new categories, when product launched as marijuana in Canada, very unusual. The only format of product we could make and sell was smokable, and it was deemed to be medical. That's not usual. If we tried to make the smokable product our second release thing, never going to get it to happen. Now we're starting to see a circumstance where there's all kinds of SKUs, and the SKUs are now starting to look at, can you help your dog? Can your geriatric parents or grandparents have a better quality of stay in that assisted living environment with a cocktail that doesn't include pharmaceutical for their inability to sleep, for their decreased mobility, for their anxiety, for their diminished appetite? If you think old, those are the 4 symptoms of being old. And the alternative of being old is way worse than being old. So you really do want to think about, how can I moderate those symptoms? So in our world, we got brands. Spectrum is the one that's going to help you. It's going to help your grandparents. It's going to help your dog. If you can't sleep, can't eat, can't kind of get up with the day, you're going to go to retail stores that give you education and confidence. They're not dirty. You're going to see products that actually have packaging and format that you like. We don't want to leave anybody out. And so with the Vanderpop line, it's all about inclusion, but it's about style, because people want to know what's in it. They want to be proud to carry it. They want to make sure that if they share it, it's not something that you have to explain what you did. You got to recognize who was legitimate. It doesn't get much more legit than Snoop. And I think he adheres to his saying. And then it's going to get technical. Technologies for the consumption of cannabis are just beginning. And I think what you're going to find is they get way smarter, they're aware of what's in them, and they do a better job based on that knowledge. And, well, because we started in Hershey, bringing chocolate and weed back together made a lot of sense. And that beverage I described could come in a can, or it could come in a bottle. But it's going to have 0 calories, it's going to be more enjoyable, and it's going to be ready for October 17th. So now you have to think about, what's it look like? Why are you going to line up to buy it, and how impactful is it going to be on other people who make already beverage products? Like, if you're in the business of pharmaceutical, tobacco, alcohol, cotton production, protein, we're impacting you. And so the great news is, almost all corporations in that area, which I would call about $500 billion annually of business, have struck committees. And it's because they're terrified. And what you do if you have a really good job and don't want to get fired is you strike a committee, you hire maybe Bain, be super safe, maybe get McKinsey as well, and you begin a process of contemplating what you should do. And in the duration of time it takes them to contemplate, it's almost too late. And so we're already getting through that stage right now. And so the alarms are going off, and they've gone off in alcohol, they've gone off in tobacco, and they will go off in pharmaceutical. And as we go through more and more layers, the biggest disruption that most areas of commerce have seen in the last 50 to 75 years is starting with this simple plant that can be communicated into so many different things. So other than being nasty people and causing that disruption, what are we doing and how does it work? Well, quality products. Our product's very simple to start. Grow a nice plant, put it in a nice container, price it appropriately, it should work. Sounds easy. Try that on 6 million square feet of production. You know, if you have like 10 plants and you have them in your room and you talk to them, the reason it works is they respond to CO2. It's not that hard. You can't talk enough, even me, if you have 1 million plants. And so it just starts to change how everything works, but you gotta have quality product. This is a small fraction of what it starts to look like inside of an environment that's growing things using greenhouses. When you start to have 4 or 5 million square feet of them, you get bicycles so you can ride around them. But this is like an ingredient factory. And the ingredient factories have to be taught how to be better ingredient factories, which is a very good thing for us that all the big pharma people couldn't work on it and the big ag people. So we've been able to work for multiple years now, since before I even came for my first event here, on how do we teach the plant to do a better job, meaning faster, smarter, specific ingredients, because first you got to do the farming. Well, what's it look like? You know, it starts simple. And everybody starts the same way. They propagate with cuttings, then they start using science to do tissue culture, and before you know it, you've actually stabilized seeds and genetics. So it's essentially a bag of seeds in a book, follow it, and you're going to get this exact number of milligrams from this amount of biomaterial on this exact date, and you run it through. That turns into quality inputs. They look like that. Apparently that generally makes people happy. But if you take the active part out of it, you can make gel caps. And gel caps are essentially a Canadian gummy bear, because they can have anywhere from 2.5 to 10 milligrams in them. When you have them, you will get exactly what was promised. If you're golfing, you might want to start with the 2.5 milligrams. And if you liked it, you can come back and get the exact same thing anytime you want. They're not friendly to kids, they're fun for adults. But the neat part is the effects they have and the way you make them become a pharmaceutical platform that you can actually run sleep trials. You can run geriatric care trials. And so all the science that goes in to create a great rec product really starts with the science necessary to create a medical platform. When you start a marijuana company, I can confirm, no community actually wants you to be there, like for sure. So the best place to grow marijuana are places that are somewhat derelict, meaning the biggest building in the town is empty. They have a way higher than average unemployment rate, because that also means that the utilities are fully available to you, because everybody that used to use the electricity, gas, and other inputs left. That is called Smiths Falls, Ontario. Hershey said goodbye, we said hello. And what we found out with that pattern is if anybody came up with the idea that we did not like cannabis and we should shut it down, hi Ryan, you would probably have a really violent end if you tried that idea on in Smiths Falls, and it wouldn't be because of us, it would be because of the citizens who support us. So what we did is repeated that everywhere. We took over a derelict greenhouse in Denmark. We bought a place that used to be a dairy in Saskatchewan. Our first greenhouse was an abandoned former eggplant place, which totally makes sense because no one should eat eggplants. What a bad business plan. But by doing that and embracing that and buying everything local, in my very first presentation here, I showed a picture of a outhouse. Because remember, I made my presentation the day I got here. And the outhouse was because everywhere we go, we buy everything local and we don't start tomorrow. Which means if you're going to do construction, you probably need an outhouse. And if you can't show that it was the closest place on the map that advertises the rental of outhouses, the construction team is not allowed to use the outhouse until they remedy that problem. And the logic is and was and still will continue to be, if you want to hire PhDs into a town within 5 years, you have to rent the outhouses immediately local, because the person who owns the outhouses will now have more income and they will spend it probably in the town. And over the course of that being handed around, before you know it, within 5 years, you have 5 extra awesome restaurants, somebody's opened a gym, and in our particular town, they even opened a spinning studio, which I can confirm to you, if you thought you could make money with a spin studio in Smiths Falls 6 years ago, zero chance. And by doing that, by being community focused, the community comes up way easier to hire. The houses are still 100 or 150 grand, and all of a sudden, the super smart people move to the nice community, acquire the house, and up it goes. So community focus there's no such thing, in my opinion, as, what do they call it? That's conscious spending. It's got an exact name in corporate world where you're supposed to be this like corporate social responsibility. Actually, you just got to think longer than a quarter. Because if you're going to hang around for 5 years, you're going to do all that stuff and more. So Smiths Falls, happy, good place. Our very first customers and support advocates, the people who actually could get us meetings when Health Canada didn't want to have meetings with the people they were governing, the AIDS and HIV community. And every Pride event that they wanted, anything we could sponsor, we did. We did this one, it got a little bigger. So it started off with a bicycle, it became a truck, it became a transport truck, and then it became a report from Health Canada that allegedly we were advertising. I think we're brand building. We didn't say what we sold. It's a bit like when we had all those billboards up you may have seen that said, up until the 17th of October, will it be like gelato? It said on the billboard, can I try some before I buy it? Tweed for answers. Some people thought that was advertising. We said we didn't even say what we make. How could we possibly be advertising? That one worked. There were a few that were apparently further offside. Because regulations have allowed Canadians to make decisions and they don't need to protest to have access to cannabis, 420 in Canada actually has no purpose anymore. And so we didn't want it to disappear. So we said what 420 means is that over the next 4 years, we're going to have $20 million and we're going to give it out to communities that need support to create a better circumstance in those communities. And so applications came in, 420 will go on, and we can do that. And it's not that we're being unduly generous. I just think it's an evolution of the purpose and that we should continue to actually march on. Shindig. It is the basis upon which Snoop Dogg plays in a small town called Smiths Falls. Every year, for the last 3 years, we've had a concert on the lawn at our venue, and we try to do something at every location. Because it was the headquarters first place, it started off as having a party on the grass for the police that makes the grass. And that worked pretty well because we said to everybody in town, you can have free tickets as long as you can confirm you're from town. Everybody not from town, you're going to pay $20 for a ticket. Not all the $20 are going to go to making the town better. And it kind of works. How do you give back? You make people enjoy themselves. Strategic relationships. I'm building to the part where you're going to need to do your work. Strategic relationships mean this. It does not mean I'm a victim or a customer. It does not mean you're a victim or a customer. It means that we actually mutually benefit by our association. So the way I like to run the company is we do not do joint ventures. We do not do that because a joint venture simply means it's a deferral of fighting. You might as well fight today and figure it out and either get fully in or get lost. On partnerships, it's where you make each other mutually better without necessarily having to cross-charge. So Snoop barely cross-charged for the amount he does and how much he agreed to do and how well he's been into it because he believes. And he could have enriched himself multiple times more and could and probably will some 5 years in the future. But he's carried us a long way because in Canada 3 years ago when you said Snoop Dogg thinks we're great and the Liberals hadn't yet actually pushed the button on anything, that was something. We've had and have a huge variety of super well-known genetics and we'll call it gray zone marijuana producers who won a lot of cannabis cups, who came with us, worked with us, brought their genetics to us because they want to be on the credible side of the street. Hershey used to own our primary building. Hershey used to attract 300,000 to 400,000 people every year to come for a tour. They would do a little walk around, look in, see how you make chocolate bars. At the end, they would go into a small drop-in store and they would buy on average $10 of broken chocolate bars per person per visit. And so because of 300,000 to 400,000 people and because the last person who went was 9 years of age, in my opinion, on the 17th of October, not 10 years earlier when they went on their tour, that made them 19 years of age on October 17th. We wanted to be able to welcome everyone back. And so we reopened the tour and we basically turned it into kind of like swimming lessons for cannabis, in that you should bring your old parents and your little kids and you should talk about cannabis, get education, see it so they don't think it's something to just say it's not dangerous and should be informed. But really what it's about is brand building and bring people in. We wanted to have a chocolate factory because obviously a chocolate factory that used to be a chocolate factory that becomes a pot factory that becomes a pot and chocolate factory is super awesome. And so we couldn't invite Hershey back, so we brought these guys in, which they have a bean to bar, really nice way to make chocolate. And as soon as they run the business, we put all the capital in so they could expand. And as soon as we can put cannabis in it, we thank them for setting it up. This was amazing. October 17th, we had a website. It was 101 things you could do when you're high in the back of your Uber so you weren't driving. We had bad feedback on the kaleidoscope item, but it was a great hit in that we both elevated our credibility and positioned this as Mothers Against Drunk Driving is also against drug driving. And that if you're going to have fun, be responsible. Let's not pretend it's the 60s, 70s until we get midway through the 80s where the idea of getting the car home prioritized of getting home not loaded. And so we thought, let's get in front of this early. We've been pushing money towards MAD for over 2 years. KPMG is our auditor. Deloitte was our auditor. We borrowed their credibility. Now they market that they have a customer, the customer in marijuana. We're on the New York Stock Exchange, which is in and of itself hilarious. We are a marijuana company, and we were in the same exchange as the Rockefellers rang the bell. The most hilarious part is we got on the exchange. They didn't want us there. Then they realized they wanted us there. Now they still have one ongoing rule, which is you, the cannabis guys, are not allowed to touch the bell. And it's actually gotten to the point where we won't touch the bell if they'll let us touch the bell, but we're for sure no bell. And there's two types of bells. There's a mobile and portable bell, and there's the one which is in the balcony. You cannot touch either bell. But we've been good for them, and they've given us credibility. So when I turn up in Italy, I don't sell cannabis, I sell credibility. These guys make a lot of, Corona, a lot of booze, a lot of wine. When I came here 2 years ago, it was a big splash. They had agreed to give us $490 million for about 20% of the company. I'm coming back this year because we had a reasonably productive year because they decided that they would give us 10 times more money for 3% less more of the company. And so on that basis, I'm hoping to be back next year. Final slide. And, well, it's not true. There's a few more. We're in the States, and we're in for hemp. Hemp got passed to be federally legal. The next day, the FDA said you can't do anything with it. And New York said you can, here's how. Hemp is going to be massively disruptive because you're either going to have free CBD and charge for the protein that's there and the fiber. Oh, by the way, we could actually get the fiber and maybe make my bandana with my name on for next year out of hemp. That would be way better. But you're going to have fiber, you're going to have protein, you're going to have CBD. If you monetize all of those, you're going to disrupt cotton, you're going to disrupt any kind of protein that's coming from any plant-based material, and you're going to disrupt all categories of care that can use CBD. And when you do it, you're going to take towns in upstate New York and you're going to revitalize them, and we're going to run the same shimmy over and over on a global basis. Cannabis is going to be globalized in production because everybody needs work in some part of the country, and they don't have to import. So, greatest partners in the world, I promise there's only 2 more slides. This is a good partnership, right? You work together and you're better. So, what I'd like, there are at least 10 companies here, and I don't know, I'm going to pick, I had great discussions in prior years with Fender and Harley and you name it. I think there are 10 companies here that comprehend what we did with Uber and see why it made a mutually beneficial outcome. You should think about what we should do together, how that would turn into, whether it's a series on an amp, a guitar, a motorcycle, a branded product, something that goes on your lips, your face, to your puppy. It doesn't have to become a new product, but it has to become a common call to the customers to consider something from you and from me. And if you got something, please make sure you hit that. And if that doesn't work, another dumb idea, it's just bruce@tweed.com. If I missed your email, send it again. But we want to make sure that we use this platform effectively, which means we both get torque. Thank you.
Awesome.
I think they're still awake.
You guys still with us? The Uber campaign was, and Mad campaign. Yeah, would you mind? Thank you. A little bit of dry mouth.
Well, I might steal a bottle. It's got like the Illuminati on it.
That's yours.
Cool.
The Uber campaign, Uber and Mad campaign was tremendously successful for you guys.
Yeah.
Do you find that right now with where you're at, there's still a hesitation from large brands to enter into this space?
For sure, and thank goodness, right? If everybody rushed to it at once, we're all kind of mashed around. But like, if accountants are happy to brag they have you as a customer, and the New York Stock Exchange wants the company on as a listed entity, I wouldn't say it's the topic of marijuana, it's the difference across the companies. And so if you take your company to some piece of crap little company that's going to have a recall, do 23 things wrong, lose their license, embarrass you, you probably should have a pretty sharp resume. But if you actually think about not the category, but the leaders, and go to safety and certainty, that's where the torque's going to be. And I just, right now, the challenge the sector has is that there are far more people listing as active enterprises than there are actually businesses wanting to create long-term value, which is crazy, right? Like, who wants to work in a sector that disrupts everybody, is way more interesting than anything you could ever go to a social event to talk about, and has a huge upside for both your career and financially. Like, everybody is going to come around to this, but it's going to be in order.
Eventually, everybody comes around. Do you think
Sure.
that the benefit to the people that email you post this event is that the first brands are going to have the most benefit?
Yeah, you move with clarity and value and one clear, good campaign that brings both to a much more recognized level is great. Like the Uber thing, we got more positive feedback on that than anything that we'd ever done across all these different campaigns and platforms, because people said, it's actually about great outcomes. You're both trying to get people the message so that they don't, like the people that are younger wouldn't understand, but like there was a long time where impaired driving wasn't actually a thing and 0.08 wasn't a measured thing, and it just was a big mess until it took about 2 decades to get under control. Why don't we start this right away, right way? And so that worked, but I think there's going to be branded, cross-branded lines of product that become special editions. There's all kinds of stuff. Like Hershey launched a 425 bar in Canada, meaning at 420 you have something, and by 425 you want something. I was like, wow, we did not see that coming. And I don't know if that was a test balloon or whatever, but there's opportunity for everybody. And if they would have put on that, they could have had a lot more fun with maybe it could have been like the lucky one that wins a tour.
Golden wrapper.
Just saying, think it through further.
I'm sure that there's probably people in this room whose heads are spinning and they have concepts in mind for how they'd like to partner.
I'm going to go out and hang out to the left.
So
actually,
going to the left.
behind the igloo-looking thing.
Just hotbox.
Which is a good idea, Ryan. I like it.
Do you have any advice for the people here that have to go back and try to build consensus on their end?
It sounds boring, but like, go to the companies which are listed on large exchanges, read what's called the MD&A. You'll shock everybody in the office that you're actually reading the MD&A, but it's the management discussion and analysis. Every question that anybody objects to, the answer is going to be in there. Does that company have any staying power? Do they have any intellectual property? What are the risks you would associate with working with that company? They're all in there. So, like, if you want to win, be prepared. Think it through, find a proper one, know the answers based on what is a disclosure policy obligation, and think about a one-hit, one-try. Don't sell them on a 20-year relationship. Like, we trialed it with Uber. I'm not thinking that it went badly for either, and who knows what you could do next.
Right. On that same sort of topic, there's still obviously some contention in the category, quite a bit. And I think one of the things that you've shared in the past is how you approach product development to try to deal with that contention by making things more familiar and whatnot.
Yeah, like we're in Canada, and this is like the epicenter of the evolution of cannabis, and it's still touchy. Try it on in England, right? Until July, there was zero chance anybody could talk about cannabis in England. It was classic, right? You could go over and do some marketing, and I might get some meetings, and people would say you want to go for like 10 beers after work, that was okay. But if you brought up the cannabis topic after work, it was not okay. And then in July, there was a child which had a condition which cannabis assisted, and they flipped everything upside down. But they're at like 10 years ago in Canada, and they're moving. And so what we have to do is constantly look for on-ramps that are equivalent to where society is. Because my competition is not anybody who's regulated. My competition is no public policy, followed by bad public policy, followed by a downturn in public perception. If they get the public perception on board with good public policy, what you do is we didn't regulate and make cannabis legal on October 17th. What we quit doing was ignoring it, and the government decided it might be better to actually regulate, educate, and monetize. And so when you say to anybody, anywhere, do you like ignoring cannabis and helping criminal sort of exchanges, whether it's big crime or little crime, I don't know, or do you like, as a government, regulating, educating, and monetizing? And so all of it's about a dialogue and on-ramps, but from a consumer packaged good, marketed products, medical, pharmaceutical products, I think you're not going to be able to get anything from lipstick to skin cream to dog chews to geriatric care that isn't touched by cannabis. So people are going to have to react.
There's been a lot of thought over the sort of the end of re-regularization in Canada about how pharma has probably pinned this industry down or helped to. Do you subscribe to any of that stuff?
I think it did in certain geographies, but a lot of times the industry pinned itself down too, right? What you have to have is regulation. So you can't say, well, in the absence of regulation, we're just going to do what we want. Because remember in the video, just before they closed the red curtains, they said that what was happening is people were advertising. There were thousands of products from hundreds of companies making unsubstantiated claims that could in fact be dangerous, which caused everybody to be pissed off and shut it down. That's kind of happening a lot now. Like, I have had people who interacted with me who were in an oncology treatment who thought it might be better to stop the scientific medicine-based one and go just to a heavy dose of cannabis. Well, it might be, but they came to that conclusion not on their own. There were claims placed on the internet that if you use this many milligrams of this product, you should be able to manage and shrink a tumor. I hope someday that's proven to be true. But like, the biggest problem the sector had was a combination of opponents, bias based on a whole bunch of things, and a bunch of people overrepresenting the potential of what could happen. And so where it is now is it's a bit more grounded and a bit slower, but I think it's going to be a lot. I don't think we're going to have chapter 3 of prohibition anytime soon.
That's such an interesting, like, I think some of my favorite claims of benefit are, in and around like weird things like mad cow disease, where people think it's like the
It's even a new one for me.
That's a new one for you.
If you've come up with a new indication. If anybody can come up with a new pot joke, you get a T-shirt. You already just earned yours.
Yes.
I've only had a few people ask me if I brought samples so far.
I did.
Yes, you did. He's not making that up.
Come see me after. But on that note, like as an industry leader, what kinds of things are you doing to help? Because there's tons of small players that are out there that are just saying whatever they can to make a buck, right?
So here's the best way to target medical research with cannabis. Ask the customers, our patients, we have about 100,000 of them, why do you buy cannabis? You know what? There are specific reasons and types and times of day and dosage structure and how they consume it. And if you ask 8,000 or 9,000 of them, you come to the priority indications for which each of the plants are being used by time of day and by dosage. And then what you do is you start deconstructing the plant and putting things back together. So we're running a sleep trial, a human sleep trial, right? One where it's called a phase 2B, which means that if we get the response, meaning you could fall asleep or stay asleep better, we can claim that cannabis with this combination of things and delivery does this. And our goal is by the end of the year to be there. And the reason we picked it is a whole bunch of people buy it as their second most popular reason is to fall asleep or stay asleep. If you look in the category of sleep, there is no incumbent product that people are saying, you know, this is the greatest thing ever. I joke, like I used to pick on Ambien. I used to say it by name. But then when like Roseanne blew up, I felt bad for them for like a little while. And so I quit saying Ambien. But I guess I'm back to saying Ambien. That is not an incumbent product that people are super loyal to. And then if you look at the scope and size of the market, it's gigantic. And then if you think about who needs it as a second wave, it's not just all of us who have sleep-based anxiety and wake up at 2:45 in the morning figuring stuff out. When you start to look at what happens as people go into the geriatric care stage, the assisted living stage, the good news is you found a really nice place to move your parents to. The bad news is it's not their place. So they don't really know the food. They don't really sleep great. They don't move around as much because they're less mobile because of aches and pains. And they have anxiety, and that's why they tell you about the weather every day. And so ultimately, if we can help sleep as an indication and we can do it in a way that's durable and not damaging, who it affects and how it cascades to society becomes pretty meaningful.
When these claims are substantiated in the future, when more and more trials are done and we've got more indications of strong efficacy, it starts to feel a little bit like there's going to be some commoditization that's going to occur. Right now, I think most people can't get enough of the stuff. It's hard to find exactly what you want and in the quantities that you may need it. If claims come out that make, a statement that, THC is good for this, does that worry you from a brand perspective?
No, because you're not going to. So what's going to happen is growing a cannabis plant will get ever smarter, faster, bigger, stronger, and that will become viewed for what it is, which is the source of a lot of the active ingredients you need. And if you look at a cannabis plant, you should see like 100 or more active ingredients in there, of which we only know about 2 to any meaningful level, THC and CBD. The opportunity for science is to take that and view it as a bioreactor, extract from the bioreactor using a whole bunch of technologies, all those disparate ingredients, mix them together and create outcomes. And when you create outcomes, I don't know why people think all those ingredients have to stay away from all the other ingredients. Like, why can't, if cannabinoids in some concoction could make people less anxious, and if part of the reason people overdose or get addicted to opioids is because they have severe pain, which gets masked with an opioid, if you get anxious in anticipation of that pain returning and therefore begin to take the medication of the opioid more frequently, sooner, the next thing you know, you're either overdosing or getting more and more hooked. But if you started putting those two guys together and you could actually stretch out by diminishing the anxiety, the distance between dose and dose of opioid, I think what you have is a better outcome, and it's a brandable outcome, and it's a medically prescribable outcome. And these are all just theoretical things, but I think commoditization will never occur with cannabis because a commodity is something that everybody wants to grow at can, and you can sell it wherever you want. And that applies to things like wheat. But wheat does not get you very high. And so I think that it'll be a managed ingredient, and that over time, when we make a beverage, like this beverage, which this is not actually our beverage, so fear not, but when we make a single serving, all we need is 2.5 milligrams to create a great beverage. If you go to some of the illegal shops or you go to some of the spots in the US, I was in one US state last week, and there was a can that looked like a beer can. It had 100 milligrams of THC in it. If you think you were destroyed on tequila 20 years ago, that is nothing. Like 100 milligrams, and it's just because regulations didn't permit a good governance model for what should be in there, which will be damaging to the market in the short term. But like, if you can do it with 2.5 milligrams, make a great brand. 2.5 milligrams of cannabis extracted now, maybe it costs 15 cents. So it's not really the ingredient cost that creates the value. We have a yellow light. I don't know what that means.
We got the 1 minute and 32 seconds left.
I think your questions are long or my answers are long. I'm going with my answers.
You're doing great, Bruce. Don't worry.
If anybody else has some, I will go and hang out after at the side as well.
There was a question from the audience that had to do with physicians, and obviously, just as there's skeptical people in general population, there are physicians as well. What are you guys doing with them?
So on April 1st, 2014, when this program began, there were very few physicians that would let you have access. There have been over 20,000 physicians who've now let patients have access, and way more that have said, I don't know enough about it, but I'll refer you to a knowledgeable clinician. And in order for them to become knowledgeable on the 1st of April, just before the 1st of April 2014, we hired 10 people who worked at places called Pfizer, Novartis, Purdue, blah, 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 and we stole them. And we hired them because they knew how to talk to doctors, they knew where they were located, and they could get in the door. And every doctor they got in to see said, I am seeing you because I know you, there's zero chance I'm ever gonna write a script for this. And then what happened is within the first 2 or 3 months, once they got detailed, someone came in who wasn't who they expected. They weren't heavily tattooed, weren't pierced, they were your grandmother, your mother, your aunt, someone who actually didn't like the pharmaceutical result and asked, could you try it? And the physician called the person back. And so that gateway is open. We've had over 60,000 physician visits. We've done now translation of our materials into 3 languages. And then what you know is we learned what they object to, and we learned what the answers were, and we took all that data and we smashed it into something like a knowledge base, flipped it upside down and turned it into self-paced training. And we've trained over 650 retail staff in stores that aren't even our own necessarily in this country, so they can actually be certified to be knowledgeable rather than having to be an expert at cannabis. Because when a customer walks in, they want to be able to identify with someone who's a peer and know that that person's knowledgeable. And so that big circle goes around and it has a lot of yield.
It's fantastic. We are at time. Is there any last message you want to deliver to this audience?
Don't forget the email address and think about it, right? Like, I didn't give you a free show. A little bit of work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.